Now, we humans tend to look at the big finish lines, the big mountains that we're climbing, and we ignore the fact that actually there are all these little small wins that can give us loads of pleasure when we connect into them and when we give ourselves just a little moment of acknowledgement or celebration. Hey, I'm Tanya Wilkinson, and this is Death on the Daily, bringing the conversation about death out of the shadows and into the mainstream. Because along with birth and change, if there's one thing that's going to happen to us all, then death is it. And we're going to explore how death actually shows up for us on the daily in a multitude of ways, and how when we allow ourselves to accept and to be with death, how it can teach us a whole heap about how to live this life well. So welcome to this solo Notes to Self episode of Death on the Daily. And in today's episode, we're going to be really rooting into the topic of mental health. And this is a crucial topic for all of us, individually and collectively. And actually, it's one where if we look to our societies over many, many generations, particularly in the Western world, and if I think more granular, particularly where I'm sitting here in the UK, it's something that's been really stigmatized, not spoken to, brushed off. And there's so many strands of this that is rooted in our society. But that's where we all can come in, because actually by having these conversations, by spreading the awareness and by moving through this world differently, where we acknowledge our own and others' mental health, that is what is going to drive the ripple effect of change in this world. So we all have mental health just like we have physical health, and much like how our physical health can have ups and downs, and that is totally human, that is totally normal, exactly the same with our mental health. Yet we also live in a society where mental health, as I mentioned before, hasn't been spoken to, but also, for whatever reason, speaking our truth, being honest, being vulnerable, is somehow seen as a weakness. You know, there's a really bad and toxic culture when it's about, I can only show myself when I'm strong. I can only show myself when I'm successful. I can't show myself when I'm feeling down, when I'm not feeling right, when I need some support, when I've been through challenges, when I've been through failure. But actually, showing our vulnerabilities really, really is such a strength. And in fact, it's also essential for us all to thrive. And actually, if you think of the narratives that have been given to us, you know, for example, don't cry, toughen up, stay strong, in those moments when actually it's totally okay and understandable given what's happening within us, and also sometimes what's happening, you know, in our life circumstances, to crumble, to cry, to express whatever's coming through: grief, sadness, sorrow, anger, etc. So we've really been conditioned to hide our struggles, and it's no wonder therefore that so many of us suffer in silence. And if I root this into my personal journey, I can really see that. I've spoken a lot actually in a few podcast episodes of my default reaction that I've always said, and now I'm calling myself out on it, of when someone says, you know, how are you? I'm fine. How was your weekend? Oh, yeah, it was great, thanks. You know, never saying, actually, you know, I was feeling a little bit lethargic. I was feeling a bit sad. I was feeling quite low, actually. Never opening up that conversation, always sort of standing back behind, you know, that bulletproof glass of, I can't show my vulnerabilities because if I do, then somehow that makes me weak. But I've started to call myself out on it, and I've actually started to really connect into the consequences of that silence, in the fact that actually what that does is, you know, when I just respond, yeah, I'm fine, and don't speak my truth, that it doesn't give me the opportunity to speak to others, to have others to hold space for me, to have others checking in on me, but also how my, you know, I'm fine default mode also conditions those around me. That's where we can have a ripple effect that ultimately, you know, perpetuates all of these things that ultimately does us and others loads of harm. So, you know, for me, it's when I root into the importance of us talking about death, I can see just how crucial this is for society, but also I can see, you know, on the mental health side, just it's so critically important for all of us to open up and just start speaking about it. And actually, in doing so, I always touch my throat when I say this because I've got hypothyroid that I'm sure, and I've read the work of Gabor Mate, who talks about sort of the link between certain autoimmune conditions like hypothyroid and actually sort of suppressing yourself, suppressing your voice. But actually, there's a real power when we can speak our truth. And for me in this journey, actually, I've been really pleasantly surprised when I open up and I'm vulnerable. Those fears inside me just aren't realized. I have experienced so much compassion and love flowing in. So in this episode, I thought I'd just share 5 quick check-ins that we can have with ourselves on any day. And actually, it's something that I practice and that I definitely recommend, get into the habit of practicing this maybe on the daily. So firstly, start by being honest with yourself. This is the killer question. How am I really feeling? And that's something that I've been asking myself actually since I started to go on my coaching training journey, because it was in that journey actually that I realized sort of these patterns within me and where I was holding myself back from speaking my truth. And just in that moment of being honest with yourself, that is an act of self-compassion. I coach people where they say to me, I can't show myself self-compassion. I can't show myself love. I don't know how to. And I understand it. I get it, based upon our life, traumas, our conditioning, where we haven't sort of shone that compassionate and loving light on ourselves, we are completely out of practice and oftentimes don't know how to really show that love to ourselves. But literally this check-in of how am I really feeling? How am I really doing today? That for me is such a powerful, just little ritual and practice of self-compassion. And when you do this, what you need to do is tune into all of you. So tune into your body. How are you really feeling from the perspective of that inner battery? You're feeling depleted. You're feeling low. From the perspective of your emotions, what's coming up? Can you feel some tension perhaps somewhere in your body? Just give yourself space and listen deeply. The second is honoring how you're really feeling. How can you take some actions? How can you bring in self-care? What do you need in this moment to really support yourself and also to crucially make sure that your needs are being met? For example, if you're feeling like your battery is low, how can you really root into rest? What does that look like? And I get it that when we're busy or when we've got families, we've got a newborn baby, sometimes it's not as easy as saying, I'm just going to go to bed and I'm going to get my 8 hours sleep. But actually there's little rest practices that we can bring in, even in micro moments each day. So for example, for me, some of them are literally taking 3 deep breaths. Other ones are going out for a quick walk in nature, or even if I don't have time for that, popping outside and literally just connecting into myself, connecting into all of my senses as I just survey the horizon and look out to nature. As well as honoring how you're really feeling when you need to speak to someone or you need to seek support. This is such an important one. And I really, really want to stress that actually, even if you're looking in your circle and you go, I don't know where to turn to, there are also so many resources. There's so many charities when you can speak to them. It might also be supportive to book in an appointment with a doctor to chat some more. When it comes to your mental health, just like your physical health, make sure that you are getting the support through the dialogue that you need. And finally, in this section, do you need to set a boundary with someone or something? Now, a big one that I coach people on is setting those boundaries with work and making sure that you can cultivate the conditions in order for you to thrive. Because we're so conditioned to not push back and say, actually, do you know what? I need space right now. I need to make sure that I'm finishing today at 5:30 because I feel really depleted. Or I need to make sure that actually, if I call in sick, that I'm not going to answer any emails or pick up any phone calls, and that everybody knows that I'm taking the space that I deserve. Third up, it's when do we need to give ourselves a big dose of grace and compassion? Now, I mentioned it before that we can often be not giving ourselves the love and the kindness and the care that we give out to others. And actually within that, we've also got an inner critic that can be really, really harsh to us. In fact, that inner critic can be our harshest critic in life. So when you're doing this check-in, if you sense that you're beating yourself up about it or you're feeling that, connect in and see, is there anything where you need to give yourself a little bit of forgiveness. You need to give yourself some compassion. You need to give yourself some grace. You need to give yourself all of that which you would give so easily to others. And the other thing that I suggest to my clients is where, for example, they are beating themselves up. I mean, it always happens in the workspace, doesn't it? I mean, I can think of many things where, for example, you're doing a big presentation or something happens on a project and it really messes up and it feels literally like the world is falling apart. Now, if that happens, firstly, how can you give yourself that grace and compassion? We learn through our mistakes, and actually no human is perfect. So give yourself that grace and compassion, but also sometimes it can be really helpful if you can root into, for example, a past experience. So when I was working with a client recently, she had a situation, she came to me and she said, "Oh my goodness, I'm beating myself up so much about this." So we actually rooted into a past experience where she'd spoken to the fact that, something had happened. Again, it felt like the ceiling just fell in on her world. And we spoke to the fact that actually the following coaching session, literally 1 week later, she came in and she'd integrated the lessons learned. She could see it through a clear lens that actually it wasn't that deep. And she moved forwards from it with some powerful intention as well as just perspective, that actually, even though things can, make us feel at our most fearful, that's not a true reflection of our reality. That's just some sort of hyper magnified version that we're playing out in our mind. Fourth up, we've got connecting into the wins. And by this, of course, yes, let's connect into the big wins, but I also mean connecting into those small wins that happen each and every day. Now, we humans tend to look at the big finish lines, the big mountains that we're climbing, and we ignore the fact that actually there are all these little small wins that can give us loads of pleasure when we connect into them and when we give ourselves just a little moment of acknowledgement or celebration. So can you connect into just something that there is to celebrate right now? That actually within those small wins, as Lucy Sheridan shared on a past episode, they might literally just be, "I have done the bare essentials and nothing else today." But that in itself is a win. And fifth and final one for these internal check-ins with ourselves is being mindful of that inner dialogue. Through these practices, that's what you're doing actually. You're cultivating a real mindful connection with yourself, which is so profound. And what I will say as well is it's a practice. I'm still on my journey of just connecting deeper into presence with myself. My journey of presence is actually a lifelong journey, both of connection to my inner world, as well as deepening my connection to my outer world. And when we can open up and be really honest with ourselves and tune into what's going on inside, that then spotlights what are our choices here? Which path do we want to go down? Do we need to bring in some self-care? Do we need to speak to a friend? Do we need to seek out some other support? Do we have any needs that are not being met? Do we need to set a boundary that really makes sure that we are honoring ourselves in this moment? And I just very quickly wanted to touch on how we can support each other, because community care and connection is so, so important for me. And it's a really important value that I want to run through everything that I'm doing in Death in the Daily. Now, the reality is that we humans, we're not built to shoulder this life and those, ups and downs alone. We thrive on interconnection. And when someone is feeling low and they need support, the greatest gift that we can give them is simply sitting with them and holding space, meeting them exactly where they are, versus trying to come in and fix things, trying to change the subject because it feels awkward. Just as it's crucial for us to create space for people to talk about death, for people to talk about their grief, which obviously is interconnected with our mental health. On the daily, it's really important for us to be aware of others, to be tuning in, connect into the energy that you feel. And if something doesn't feel right with someone, check in on them. And maybe, even if they have the response that I used to have, which is, "Yeah, I'm absolutely fine. No worries. It's all good." Just keep gently checking in with them. Just let them know that you are there, you are present. And if they need an ear, you'll be there to be that listening ear. And finally, my note to self that I do at the end of each episode Today's is really simple. It's a couple of lines that really, really resonate with me. It's a check-in that I am now committed to doing on the daily with myself. And if you want to join me, come join me in this beautiful practice. So just take a deep breath with me. Connect into your body as you ask yourself, how can I be kinder to myself in this moment? Giving myself the grace, the compassion, and the love that I give so freely to others. And so this completes today's episode of Death on the Daily. And for me, where I'm leaving this episode is just really connected into how important it is for us all to break that stigma and that silence around mental health. So let's keep this conversation going. Let's make sure that we're checking in with ourselves, make sure that we're checking in with each other and having those conversations as and when we need. And I'll also add some links into the show notes of mental health charities that can be really supportive. Obviously, these are going to be quite UK focused. So if you're anywhere else, just have a Google. There's so many different resources. And I know from my own bereavement experience of calling up the helpline at a charity, just how powerful it can be, even having someone at the other end of a phone line listening in. So make sure that if you need, have that conversation, reach out. You don't have to walk this path alone. And until next time, and for you all, I really, really mean this when I say, please take good care of yourself and others.
All of my gratitude to you for joining me for another Dead Conversation. Death on the Daily is edited by David Strutt. The music is Set Free by Katie Gray. And I am Tanya Wilkinson. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would be over the moon if you can rate, review, and subscribe. It really, really helps me to get the word out there. And if you want to say hi or to hear more about my work as a coach and death doula, including how I support my clients to navigate their death on the daily, then all of the ways that you can connect with me are in the show notes. I'll be back soon with some more Dead Conversations. And in the meantime, take good care of yourself and others.
There's a cold fire, there's a crossfire, and there's something inside, and we'll never, never make it, and we'll never, never break.